I remember that morning, the kind of foggy dawn San Francisco is famous for, when the sun crawls out of the bay like an old man who hasn't had his coffee yet. I was at the convention center early, guest badge swinging from my neck, still holding a latte gone cold an hour ago. Above the stage hung a familiar logo, Cortex Systems, the company where I had spent 6 years writing every line of code, fixing every tiny bug, trading away both sleep and self respect. They were calling today a historic day. I called it the day I officially became a ghost in my own house. Marcus Hale, the CTO, and the kind of man who could make a meeting look like a stand up show, walked to center stage. He wore a light gray suit, hair slicked back, grinning like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. I had to give him credit. Marcus had a rare skill, lying while looking inspirational. "We call it PulseNet," he said, voice ringing like he was selling a dream. I almost laughed. "We? Huh? Of course. We." The favorite word of people standing on someone else's shoulders. On the giant screen behind him, code began to scroll. And right then, my heart skipped a beat. It was my code. Every character, every comment, even the weird variable name, PBX, latency fix, a shorthand only I used, is still there. But in the top right corner, someone had added a line, optimized by M. Hale. I leaned back in my seat, smiling. Not the happy kind of smile. The kind of smile you give when you're watching a masterclass in theft. I used to think Marcus was just arrogant. Turns out I underestimated him. He wasn't just arrogant. He was confident enough to believe he'd never get caught. The hall erupted in applause. Some of my old coworkers even stood up, cheering like they'd witnessed a miracle. I sat still, silent, like a spectator in a play I had written myself. They called it collective glory. I called it the most elegant erasure I'd ever seen. The stage lights swept over the crowd and landed on the row where I sat. For a split second, my eyes met Marcus's. No shame. Just a polite nod, the kind that said, "Good job, Brooks. But from here on, I've got it." I answered with a smile thin as thread. If looks could make a sound, mine would have rung like metal hitting glass. The launch ended with booming music and a shower of confetti. I stood up, moving with the stream of people heading toward the stage to shake hands with the hero. Each step felt like the ticking of a clock counting down to something breaking. Outside the hall, the wind from the bay carried salt and metal in the air. I leaned on the railing, watching the Golden Gate's lights blink through the heavy fog. In my pocket, my phone buzzed nonstop. Internal notifications, congratulations, and one company-wide email from Marcus. "Thanks to my amazing team. PulseNet is proof of Cortex's vision and our relentless spirit of innovation. No Elena, no backend. Teamed him." Just Marcus Hale and his grand vision. I let out a quiet laugh. The laugh you give when you realize you're too tired to be angry anymore. Some pain moves past rage. It leaves only exhaustion mixed with contempt. That night, I went back to my small apartment in the Mission District. The rent was climbing every year, while my salary wasn't. The room looked exactly as it had for 6 years. One desk, one monitor, and a stack of empty coffee cups. When I powered up the computer, the repository lit up, PulseNet source glowing in the dark. I opened the first file, main core B1, the original I wrote 6 years ago, back when I still believed technology could change the world. At the top, I saw the comment I'd written on that first night, created by Elena Brooks, for the people who believe in code that matters. I leaned back, fingers tapping the desk. Out there, they were clinking champagne glasses. All I had was cold coffee and one undeniable truth. In tech, people can copy your code, ideas, and even your dreams. But there's one thing they can never steal: the memory of you creating it with your own hands. I turned off the screen, stood up, and looked out the window. The wind carried the sound of horns and damp smoke. I knew something inside me had shifted. I wasn't the idealistic engineer anymore. I was invisible inside my own empire. And I had just decided I wouldn't let myself disappear again. I don't know where you're listening to this from. Maybe in your car, stuck in morning traffic, or sipping coffee at your usual cafe. Maybe you're in a city like San Francisco, where tech dreams blaze bright on the outside but are full of cracks within. Wherever you are, I bet you felt it too. That moment when you do all the work and someone else stands in the spotlight. That instant you sit in the crowd, hearing your own effort retold in someone else's voice, and all you can do is smile. I see you, the one nodding right now because you know exactly what that feels like. Keep listening. The next part, 6 years stolen, is where everything starts to change, and trust me, you'll want to hear it all. 6 years. Long enough to turn a dreamer into a realist, long enough to forget why you started, and sometimes cruel enough to turn passion into routine, a routine nobody notices. I joined Cortex Systems at 22, fresh out of college, full of hope, full of caffeine, naive enough to believe tech startups were places where people changed the world. I still remember the day they called me after a hackathon in Palo Alto. Marcus was the one who interviewed me. He sat there, arms crossed, smiling the way a man does when he's used to recruiting bright kids to drain every ounce of energy out of them. "You seem to understand real time data analytics pretty well," he said. I nodded, eager to pitch my idea. Marcus listened and replied with just one sentence. "Good. We need someone like you, someone smart, but who knows how to listen." If I could go back to that moment, I'd probably stand up and leave the room. But when you're 22 and all of Silicon Valley is talking about passion and opportunity, you don't walk away, you sign the contract. In the beginning, I worked like I was under a spell. I didn't count the hours, didn't know what a day off was. I wanted to prove I belonged. And when the idea for PulseNet came, the algorithm that could stream data and learn from the users themselves, I thought I had touched something huge. I stayed at the office past midnight, falling asleep at my keyboard, marker ink on my hair, fingers swollen from typing nonstop. I didn't feel tired. I felt happy. When PulseNet first ran and cut system latency by over 35%, I cried. Not because of a bonus, but because for the first time I saw something I built come alive. But at Cortex, nothing you build is ever yours. The next day, Marcus called an emergency meeting. He told the board, "We've achieved something no one else has." We. There it was again. We. I sat in the corner, hiding a small smile. Back then, I still thought, it's okay, collective credit is good too. But a week later, an email arrived from legal. All intellectual property developed during employment at Cortex Systems is the sole property of the company. One cold sentence. 7 words that killed my name as an author. I kept working, because I still believed. I thought if I just tried harder, they'd see. I imagined one day Marcus would introduce me at a meeting. "This is Elena, the creator of PulseNet." Instead, I got a mug with the company logo and an Employee of the Quarter email. I still have that mug, not because I treasure it, but because it reminds me. Sometimes they pay you in souvenirs. The company grew. Conference rooms changed from open spaces to glass fortresses, and I was still at the same desk, same screen, same paycheck, barely covering my Matchbox apartment rent. Sometimes I overheard Marcus on calls with investors. "Yes, PulseNet is a technology we developed. Yes, the idea came from the leadership team's strategic vision." Every time I heard that, I pictured him standing in a storm of data, parting the seas like Moses while I was underwater, patching every line of code. Time passed. I learned silence. Not because I was weak, but because I realized the more you talk, the more they use your words as weapons against you. Then PulseNet became so successful that even Marcus couldn't believe it. Cortex was valued at nearly $1 billion, the press hailing it as the tech unicorn of the century. And me? Still at the office after 11 at night, patching the minor details they left behind. I remember on my birthday sitting alone between the server racks, listening to the steady whir of fans. The blue LED lights reflected on the walls like artificial fireflies. I laughed. This was a true engineer's birthday party. Marcus walked in with a glass of wine. "Elena, I've been invited to speak at the TechX conference. They want to hear about PulseNet." I asked quietly, You'll mention the development team, right? He smiled, the kind of smile adults give a child asking a serious question. Of course, I always talk about the team. I knew the team meant me, Marcus Hale, but I still nodded, still wrote more code, worked like I owed them my existence. Truth is, I didn't hate Marcus, I just pitied him. He needed the spotlight to feel valuable. Me? I only needed to see my code run smoothly, and that, I realized, was exactly why I was losing. One night, I overheard marketing planning a campaign. Someone said, "We'll present PulseNet as the innovation of CTO Marcus Hale. His name carries more weight than some unknown engineer." That sentence woke me up completely. I wasn't angry anymore. I had only one thought. I let them steal 6 years of my life. I opened my old repo, scrolling through thousands of lines of code. Each line is a sleepless night, each comment a piece of me, and all of it is being sold to the world under someone else's name. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't want to go to work the next morning. Not because I was tired, but because I knew if I stayed, they'd keep erasing me bit by bit. The next day, Marcus walked past my desk. "Elena, don't overwork yourself. Remember, we're a family." I looked up and smiled. "Sure, only in this family. I guess I'm the foster kid." He laughed, not understanding. But me, I understood perfectly. And in that moment, I knew my story had just turned the page. I always thought of myself as patient. I could wait hours for a build to finish, run an algorithm hundreds of times until it smoothed out. But there's one thing no line of code can teach you: how to wait for someone else to recognize your worth. I had waited 6 years, and one Monday morning, I realized I'd waited enough. Cortex's office sat on the 23rd floor, where glass reflected light into silver ribbons curling through the room. I walked in, black coffee in hand, and decided I'd talk to Marcus. No email, no internal chat, no circling. I would demand my value back, at least in the number on my paycheck. Marcus had his own office, of course, spacious, bright, reeking of arrogance. Every time I walked past, I saw him hunched over his laptop as if running NASA, when in reality he was drafting LinkedIn captions. That day, when I walked in, he looked up, smiling like a man sure he was about to hear a plea. "Elena, come in. What's on your mind?" I sat down across from him. "I want to talk about my salary," I said flatly. "I think my contributions to PulseNet deserve a review." Marcus leaned back, arms crossed. "A review?" He dragged the word out like he was testing the sound of something foreign. "You know we're a startup. Everyone here is driven by the vision. Nobody's here for money." I gave a thin smile. "Right, except your vision comes with stock options. Mine comes with free coffee." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing in the room like a can lid dropping on a metal floor. "You're funny. But Elena, I don't think you're good at negotiating. You should focus on what you're good at: engineering. Money, politics, that's not your lane." That sentence sent a chill down my spine, not because it insulted me, but because it was familiar, the tone of people who think women in tech should keep their heads down and stay quiet. I asked softly, "You think engineers shouldn't talk about money?" Marcus shrugged. "I think a system only runs smoothly when every element stays in its place. You're a good element. Don't complicate things." I looked at him, smug face, fingers brushing his tie, eyes brimming with self-satisfaction, and realized I was staring at the perfect portrait of workplace arrogance. I stood up, ready to leave, but as my hand touched the door handle, he added lightly, "Oh, and remember, don't go around claiming PulseNet as yours. It's the company's property, legally." I turned back. "Is that a threat?" "No," Marcus shrugged. "Just a reminder. Law is law." I looked at him for a few seconds, then smiled. "You're right, Marcus. Law is law. But law also has fine print, and I read it very carefully." I walked out, heart pounding, but my head had never been clearer. The glass door closed behind me, reflecting my image in the long hallway. For the first time in years, I saw myself in that glass, not the hardworking coder, not the person behind the big vision, but someone who'd been stolen from and was about to take back what was hers. That day, I didn't do anything. I just sat, silently watching the office, faces rushing, keyboards tapping like rain. In the corner, the digital board flashed Cortex's stock climbing. Everyone was cheerful. Nobody realized that the foundation of their glory was built on my code. That afternoon, I got an email from legal. By order of the board, all employees are prohibited from disclosing technical information or product architecture of PulseNet externally. Sharing or releasing source code may constitute a security violation. Underneath was Marcus Hale's signature. He hadn't just refused me, he'd put it in writing to intimidate me. I read it over and over, then laughed. Maybe someone watching would think I was crazy, but in that laugh there was clarity. Marcus no longer saw me as a loyal engineer, he saw me as a threat. And ironically, that was his first mistake. That night, I stayed late. When everyone else had gone, only the servers hummed and the white lights glowed from the floor. I opened the internal repository, the system holding all the source code. I scrolled through files, commits, logs, and then I saw it. Copyright C, Cortex Systems. All rights reserved. Right below the code I had written. They had replaced all the notes, wiped my name. Not only that, they'd locked down access. I tried to open the old logs, but couldn't. It felt like standing at the door of my own house, locked out, everything I'd built sitting inside. I sat still for a long time, maybe an hour, maybe more. No tears, no rage, just a dense silence, like watching the first crack in a wall and knowing the whole house will fall, even as people dance in the living room. I opened my personal laptop and accessed my old archive. The original PulseNet, V1.0, was still there, untouched, time-stamped from my first year at the company. I stared at the number, smiling faintly. Marcus might have power, but I had a trail. And in the world of data, a trail is the truth. I closed the laptop. Outside, the office lights had dimmed, leaving only a few bulbs down the hallway. I walked out, my footsteps echoing through the space. Inside, the servers kept humming like a sleeping beast, unaware that the person who created it had just decided to wake up. That day, my trust didn't just crack, it shattered. And in those shards, something else began to form, a plan. I didn't leave Cortex right after that. In fact, I still showed up every day, still made my coffee at 8 in the morning, still sat in the same chair beneath that giant poster that read, "Innovation never sleeps." Every time I looked at it, I thought, yeah, that's true. But fairness has been asleep for a long time. I knew I was sitting inside a beehive ruled by one queen bee named Marcus Hale. A hive that shimmered on the outside, buzzed loudly, but was filled with fake honey. I didn't yell. I didn't quit. I didn't lose my temper. I went quiet. Because in the tech world, silence at the right time is more dangerous than any malware. The days that followed, I started backing things up. Not a few random files, but the entire system structure. Every module, every commit, every historical record. I annotated carefully, added timestamps to each section. Anyone watching probably thought I was cleaning up code, but what I was really doing was cleaning up evidence. That's when I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. Over 60% of PulseNet's core logic was mine, untouched, unchanged. Marcus could erase my name, but he couldn't erase my style. Like a fingerprint, every programmer has one. A rhythm, a naming pattern, a flow. And PulseNet carried my voice in every line. I knew I needed someone who'd understand that. Someone outside Cortex, beyond Marcus's control. And that's when I remembered Lena Ortiz. Lena had been a tech journalist who covered women engineers and AI. We met when I was an intern. She once told me, "Never let them rewrite your story, and if they try, take the pen back." I sent her a short message. "Lena, I have a story, but it's not over yet." She replied 3 minutes later. "When do we meet?" We met at a small cafe near the Embarcadero Pier. The city was thick with fog that morning, wrapped in a white blur, just like how Cortex was smothering the truth. Lena brought a notebook. I brought a hard drive. She listened without interrupting, only nodding now and then. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "Elena, do you have a patent for PulseNet?" I looked up and smiled for the first time in days. Yes, under my old name, Elena Vargas. I filed it 6 years ago, right after finishing the first version. Marcus has no idea. Lena grinned. Girl, you're exactly the kind of person who keeps corporate lawyers awake at night. I laughed, a real laugh, the first in weeks. But it didn't last long, because I knew what was coming wouldn't be easy. I'd have to fight them using their own rules. That night, I sat in my apartment, opened the patent documents again. The pages were worn, the blue ink signature slightly faded, the registration number still printed in the corner, everything valid. I remembered those months, living on instant noodles to pay the legal fees of an old lawyer named Harold, who helped me phrase the patent description just vague, enough to stay hidden from the company, but precise enough for legal protection. Harold once told me something I never forgot. Engineers like you think in algorithms. They think in contracts, so learn to play chess on their board. And now I was ready for that game. I didn't want to destroy Cortex. I just wanted my name back. But I also understood sometimes reclaiming what's yours is enough to make the whole system collapse. In the weeks that followed, I became the perfect actress. I showed up, joined meetings, smiled at coworkers, discussed new features, and acted like nothing had happened. Marcus believed I'd accepted my place. How sweet. He didn't realize he'd just given me more time. I began building a secret copy of the system, a mirrored repository stored on my personal machine, encrypted and backed up multiple times. Every time PulseNet changed, I logged it, timestamped it, and archived a digital proof record. No one suspected a thing. Marcus even emailed me once, praising my dedication and team spirit. I almost laughed out loud. If only he knew who I was really working for. Outside Cortex, the world kept spinning in glitter and headlines. The media buzzed about the data revolution, about PulseNet, the brainchild of Marcus Hale. I wasn't angry anymore. I just archived every article into a folder labeled Evidence, Public Misinformation. Every word they wrote about Marcus's vision would soon become part of the case against him. One night, while scanning through system logs, I noticed something strange. PulseNet was being deployed in an external network, one that didn't belong to any commercial client. The IP traced back to a defense contractor. My stomach dropped. Marcus hadn't just stolen my code, he was selling it. If that ever came to light, Cortex wouldn't just face lawsuits, they'd face a federal investigation. I downloaded everything, encrypted it, then pulled the hard drive. That's when I realized the game had changed. I wasn't just holding evidence anymore, I was holding the knife. Before leaving the office that night, I ran into Owen, one of my earliest teammates. He looked uneasy. Elena, he said quietly, Marcus knows you've been backing up data. He says it's just a security check, but something feels off. I looked at him and recognized that look, the eyes of someone torn between loyalty and guilt. Thanks, I said softly. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. He nodded slowly. Just don't take risks. Cortex doesn't forgive people who push back. I smiled, a calm smile meant to reassure, though inside I felt strangely still. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I had finally chosen a side. That night, back home, I placed the hard drive on the table, turned on the lamp, and stared at it. A tiny piece of metal, but inside it held Cortex's past, present, and future. And I, the woman they erased, was about to use it to rewrite history. 3 days after discovering that Cortex had secretly sold my technology to a defense contractor, I sent an email requesting leave. The reason line was short: need some time to rest. Marcus replied in under 5 minutes. Take all the time you need, Elena. You deserve it. Don't forget, we're still a team. We're. I reread that word 3 times, not sure whether to laugh or cry. If he knew I was preparing to walk off stage carrying the main prop of his entire show, that smile of his would vanish fast. The first 2 days, I just wandered around the city. December in San Francisco was always damp and heavy with salt in the air. I sat in the park, watching fog drift across the Bay Bridge, listening to the cable cars clatter down the street, thinking about the past 6 years, the sleepless nights, the pointless meetings, the endless thank you for your dedication emails that replaced real recognition. I wasn't angry anymore, just quiet, with the kind of calm that comes when you realize the monster you once feared isn't strong enough to bite anymore. On the third day, I started moving. I didn't attack them, not in the way they would expect. I simply prepared for the truth to surface. I built a small tool to monitor how their systems operated. I disguised it as an internal performance tracking utility. To everyone else, it looked like a harmless update, something meant to optimize workflow. But to me, it was a tiny door into the heart of Cortex, where I could see everything when the product was used, where, and by whom. I wasn't sabotaging, I was observing. I didn't send a virus, I sent the truth. Every time the system ran, data quietly flowed back to my personal machine, a silent record of what they were doing with what I had created. Within a week, my tool was deployed company wide. Marcus bragged everywhere that he had led the development of the smartest performance monitoring software of the year. He even posted a selfie in the office with the caption, "Proud of my brilliant engineering team." I just smiled. Maybe Marcus never realized. Arrogance has a way of making you blind. When the data started coming in, I saved every log carefully. I saw PulseNet being used not just in commercial networks, but inside a military project, an explicit violation of technology licensing laws. This wasn't a mistake anymore. It was a crime in a suit. I knew I couldn't fight alone. I needed power, something big enough to protect me and turn the truth into a legal weapon. The first name that came to mind was NovaForge, Cortex's direct rival. 2 years earlier, NovaForge had offered me a position as lead engineer, but Marcus blocked it. "They only want your name to attract investors," he'd said. "You're safer here." Right. Safer. Inside the golden cage he'd locked me in for 6 years. I sent a short message to NovaForge's CTO. "My name is Elena Brooks. I have information about Cortex, using technology obtained through patent violation. If you're interested, meet me." He replied the same day. "Seattle. Private meeting." I flew to Seattle the next morning, carrying a hard drive with all the data. It was drizzling. The city smelled of roasted coffee and cold air. We met at a small cafe by the lake. The man listened silently as I told him everything. When I finished, he asked just one question. "What do you want?" "I want them held accountable. No sabotage. Just the truth, recorded properly." He nodded. "If what you're saying is true, we can help. But we'll need you to confirm patent ownership. If this tech is yours, we can defend you in court." I smiled. I don't need them to defend me. I just need them to listen. We signed a temporary agreement, and I left the cafe once the rain stopped. The lake was calm, and the gray sky reflected perfectly on its surface. I saw my reflection in the water, fragile but unyielding. A woman who had finally stepped out of her own old story. When I returned to San Francisco, Marcus called me into his office. "Elena, I heard you met with someone from NovaForge." I shrugged. "News travels fast. You should remember, Cortex doesn't forgive betrayal." I looked straight into his eyes, voice steady. "Funny. When you took what was mine, it was called teamwork. When I protect what's mine, is it betrayal?" Marcus went silent. His face drained from red to pale, like someone had unplugged the power from his pride. I gave a faint smile and said, "Don't worry, Marcus. I'm not destroying the company. I'm just making sure the story gets told the right way." I walked out, leaving him standing alone in that spotless glass office. I knew he was afraid, not because I was powerful, but because he had no idea what I held. That night, I came home and turned on my computer. Thousands of lines of data scrolled across the screen, pulsing like a steady heartbeat. I saved everything onto the hard drive and placed it on the table, a small, silent block of metal. But inside, it was the entire truth Cortex had tried to bury. I stared at it for a long time. If Marcus was the man who built his castle out of sand, then I was the one standing with the tide. And I didn't have to strike. I just had to wait for the water to rise. I knew the wave would come. I just didn't expect it to hit this soon. 3 days after I returned from Seattle, whispers began spreading through Cortex's internal network. Rumors moved like wind trapped in glass. Elena sold information to a competitor. They said Nova Forge had bought me out, that I'd betrayed the company and stolen confidential data. Within 48 hours, the story slipped outside. First, a few lines on tech forums, then an anonymous post on a major news site. Former Cortex engineer suspected of leaking proprietary information. The headline was cold as steel. No evidence, but just enough for people to believe. Marcus, of course, didn't waste the moment. He appeared on a televised business segment wearing a black suit and a voice dipped in fake sorrow. Cortex has always valued every individual contribution, he said, but actions that compromise our clients' trust cannot be tolerated. I nearly spit out my coffee. The same man who laughed in my face when I asked for a raise was now performing as the compassionate leader, mourning the loss of his so-called creation. Marcus's gift, or his poison, was his ability to control the narrative. He never accused me outright. He simply planted the seeds of doubt. And once doubt takes root in the soil of the media, it grows faster than weeds. Overnight, I went from quiet engineer to tech trader. My inbox is filled with mockery, hate, and pity. Former coworkers, the same ones who used to beg me for late-night bug fixes, went silent. Nobody wanted to be seen standing next to me. But I wasn't afraid. I had expected Marcus to strike back, and, as always, he overestimated his control. The next morning, I got a message from Lena Ortiz, the journalist friend I'd met weeks earlier. 2 lines only. The moment's here. I need the proof. Send me everything. I took a long breath and replied, "You'll have it, but be careful. They'll fight back." That night, Lena's article went live on the country's biggest tech publication. The Woman Erased from History: Who Really Built PulseNet? It opened with a photo of me sitting before my computer in that tiny apartment. No makeup, no shine, just the glow of the monitor on my face and a pair of eyes still alive in the dark. Lena told my story from the start, how a young woman who believed in technology's promise ended up betrayed by the system she helped build. She didn't write it like a tragedy. She wrote it like a fact, cold, precise, undeniable. The piece exploded. People started asking, if Elena really built the core technology, why isn't her name on the patent? A small question, but one strong enough to crack the polished wall Marcus had spent years constructing. The media is split into two. One side defended Cortex, calling me a bitter former employee. The other, growing by the hour, began digging through archives, finding that PulseNet's earliest prototypes existed long before Marcus ever joined the company. On social media, the hashtag #HashJusticeForElena started trending. Someone wrote, "She's the reason that product exists. They just took the credit." Another posted, "I've been robbed like her. Feels damn good to see truth finally crawl out of the shadows." As for me, I just sat in my apartment, watching the blue glow of my phone screen. No thrill, no fear, just a strange calm, peace inside the storm. Marcus didn't share that peace. A day after the article, he held an emergency press conference. I watched it live. His face was stiff, his smile gone. Behind him, the Cortex logo burned bright, but his eyes had dimmed. "This is a misunderstanding," Marcus said. "We're conducting an internal review. Cortex has always respected every individual contribution." I laughed out loud. Always respected every individual contribution. That was the most elegant lie a thief could ever tell on camera. Right after the press conference, Cortex's stock dipped slightly. Not much, just a few points, but enough for investors to smell smoke. One of them, Everett Chen, head of Nova Forge, immediately sent a formal request for a patent ownership investigation. And within days, everything collapsed. Nova Forge released a public statement. "We have received verified evidence that the PulseNet technology is patented under the name of Elena Brooks, filed before her employment at Cortex Systems." The news spread faster than any source code ever had. News outlets, TV anchors, bloggers, everyone ran the story. Within 24 hours, my name was on every front page. Marcus scrambled. He hired lawyers, issued press releases, and leaked new smears. But the more he talked, the deeper he sank in his own web. I didn't need to answer. I sent only one message to the country's largest paper. I have nothing more to add. The truth speaks for itself. And it did. A week later, the Federal Technology Commission stepped in. They ordered Cortex to hand over all patent documents, development logs, and internal correspondence. News hit the investors. Cortex stock plummeted. Marcus was suspended pending investigation. I read the report while sitting in a cafe, latte gone cold. The man next to me was watching the same news, shaking his head. "Shame about that CTO," he said. "They say he used to be brilliant." I turned, smiled, and replied, "Yeah, sometimes the greatest talent someone has is stealing someone else's work." He chuckled, unaware that the woman sitting beside him, the quiet engineer once erased from history, had just shaken an entire tech empire to its core. When I received the summons from the Federal Technology Commission, I knew the game had reached its final act. The hearing was held in Washington, a large room with cream walls, high ceilings, and rows of leather chairs aligned perfectly beneath white lights that seemed designed to expose everything hidden beneath them. I sat in the front row, facing the long table where the commission members were seated. On my right was Nova Forge's attorney, a calm, silver-haired man with steady eyes. On my left sat the representatives from Cortex, and, of course, Marcus. He looked nothing like before, no confident smile, no arrogance, just red eyes from sleepless nights and a gray suit wrinkled slightly at the cuffs. When our eyes met, he gave a small nod. I nodded back, not in hatred, but in quiet recognition. We both knew what was about to happen. The chairwoman spoke first. "We are gathered today to determine the rightful ownership of the technology known as PulseNet. Ms. Elena Brooks, do you have evidence confirming that you developed this technology before your employment at Cortex Systems?" I stood, steady and composed. "Yes, I do. I filed the patent 6 years ago under my birth name, Elena Vargas. The original documentation and registration bear the official seal of the National Patent Office." A technician brought the file onto the screen. The record appeared clear: dates, signature, and stamp. The room fell silent. I could hear the rustle of papers, the soft tap of a pen, and Marcus taking a slow, deep breath. The chairwoman continued, "Can you explain how this technology evolved during your time at Cortex?" I nodded and told them everything. From my first day of recruitment, through the sleepless nights, the erased credits, the stolen recognition, to the day my code was sold for defense contracts. I spoke slowly, precisely. No anger, no self-pity. I didn't need sympathy, I just needed the truth to be heard. When I finished, Cortex's attorney rose, a smooth-voiced man in his 50s. "The committee should be aware that, under her employment contract, any product developed during Ms. Brooks's time at Cortex is the company's intellectual property." I smiled faintly. "That's correct, but that clause applies only to projects initiated during employment. PulseNet was patented before I joined, and in my original contract, the Personal Property Declaration section explicitly lists that patent." The attorney went silent, flipping through the papers. His face paled, as if someone had just pulled the chair out from under him. Marcus stayed quiet. I knew what was running through his mind: the press conferences, the awards, the speeches built on someone else's work. For the first time, he must have realized he wasn't untouchable. The chairwoman turned toward him. "Mr. Hale, do you have a response?" Marcus cleared his throat, standing awkwardly. "Yes. I just want to say that if there were any oversights in attribution, they were administrative, not intentional. I never meant to—" He hesitated. "I always considered Elena an important part of the team." I looked at him and said softly, "Thank you, Marcus. But I never wanted to be part of the team. I just wanted to be recognized as myself." The sentence landed clean and cold in the room. No one spoke after that. When the questioning ended, they asked us to wait outside while the board deliberated. I stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, The air was cold, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Lena, my journalist friend, who had flown in from San Francisco, walked up and said quietly, "No matter the outcome, your story has already changed something." I smiled. I just told the story that should have been told from the start. An hour later, they called us back in. The chairwoman read the verdict. The commission hereby recognizes Ms. Elena Brooks, registered as Elena Vargas, as the lawful owner of the PulseNet technology. All products, contracts, and profits derived from this technology will be subject to review to determine rightful ownership. The recorder clicked softly. The heavy air of the room dissolved into silence. Marcus sank into his chair, staring ahead, speechless. As for me, I didn't cheer, didn't cry, didn't smile. What filled me was something gentler, like warmth after a long rain. Release. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. "Elena, will you sue Cortex?" "Elena, will you return to the tech industry?" "Elena, how does it feel to win?" I stopped, looked straight into the nearest lens, and said, "I didn't win. I just got my name back. And if anyone's listening, I hope they understand. No one has the right to erase you from your own creation." Behind me, Marcus emerged, surrounded by reporters. For a brief second, our eyes met again, lost, hollow, as if his entire world had collapsed beneath his feet. I felt no triumph. Because he had burned down his own house long ago, I had merely stood and let it burn. That afternoon, I sat alone in a cafe near the plaza. Sunlight spilled through the window, gold on the table. I opened my phone to thousands of messages, congratulations, encouragement, even apologies from old colleagues at Cortex. I posted only one line: "Justice doesn't arrive on its own. It comes when someone stands up for it." Then I turned off my phone and looked outside. The clouds drifted slowly across a calm sky. I knew my story wasn't over, but for the first time in years, I could finally breathe like a free human being. I used to think that once the truth came out, everything would feel lighter, clean, peaceful, but it didn't. After a storm, peace doesn't always follow. Sometimes all that's left are the broken pieces, and people keep trying to fit them back together, even when they know it'll never be whole again. Weeks after the hearing, the media still wouldn't let go of Cortex. Headlines poured in. Tech giant collapses after intellectual property fraud. My name was everywhere, and Marcus had become the face of disgrace. The man who once stood on stage with a proud smile was now hunted by the same cameras that once praised him. Reporters followed him from home to cafes. Each time he appeared, his face looked thinner, his eyes darker, his hair grayer. Online, they called him the smartest thief in Silicon Valley. And I, the obedient engineer he once dismissed, was now the name that had stripped him of everything: reputation, power, pride. Cortex didn't survive. The board dissolved. Investors fled in waves. 1 month after the commission's verdict, the company officially declared bankruptcy. The headline ran bold across every paper, from unicorn to shipwreck, the 6-year rise and fall of Cortex Systems. I read it sitting in the same cafe where I once dreamed that justice would come. Now that it had, I didn't feel joy, just quiet. It wasn't that I wanted them to fall. I just wanted everything to go back where it belonged. One afternoon, Lena called. "Did you see the evening news?" Marcus went on TV again. "He's saying you staged the lawsuit for revenge." I smiled faintly. I guess he still hasn't learned how to lose gracefully. I turned on the TV. On the screen, Marcus sat in an interview. His face was hollow, the confidence forced, the spark in his eyes long gone. He spoke in that same smooth, practiced tone, as if he were still running a company. "I don't deny her contributions," he said, "but PulseNet was a team effort. If every engineer claimed credit, there'd be no companies left in this world." The reporter asked, "Do you regret not giving her recognition sooner?" Marcus paused, then answered, voice dry. "Regret? No, I only regret trusting the wrong person." I laughed, short, cold, empty. Even now, with all the evidence laid bare, he still chose to play the victim of his own story. Marcus wasn't destroyed by me. He destroyed himself because he couldn't live with the idea that someone else might be better. After that interview, Marcus vanished. Rumor said he left San Francisco for a small northern town. Some claimed he was writing a book about leadership lessons. Others said he was trying to start over, another small company, barely noticed. I didn't care. To me, he'd disappeared long ago, the moment he laughed at me for asking for a raise. As for me, life shifted to a different rhythm. The press kept calling, the interviews kept coming, the offers piled up, but this time I didn't chase them. I chose carefully. When Nova Forge invited me to be a technical advisor, I declined. Not out of pride, but because I knew I'd paid my debt to this industry. I no longer needed a spotlight to prove I existed. I left the city and rented a small house by the beach in Santa Cruz, a place where the waves didn't care who you used to be. Every morning, I made coffee, opened the window, listened to gulls, and breathed in the salt. No meetings, no contracts, no polished compliments, just me, and the silence I hadn't known in 6 years. But something still stirred inside me. Not ambition, unfinished purpose. The feeling that my story wasn't truly done. One night, I opened my old laptop, the same one that had seen all my sleepless nights at Cortex. The screen flickered on, and the words appeared. "Welcome back, Elena." I smiled. Maybe it was time to build something new. Not for anyone else, but as a reminder of what I once believed in. I started coding again. Not a product for profit, not a patent to protect, not a paycheck to chase. Just an open system, free for anyone to learn from and improve. I called it Mirror, a reflection of true value, a place where no one's name could ever be erased. I uploaded it quietly, no announcement, no marketing. And somehow, within days, it spread like a small flame catching the wind. People used it, built on it, wrote about it. Messages poured in, thank yous, stories, small notes that said things like, "For the first time, I'm working with something that feels honest." I read them all, smiling softly. No triumph, no arrogance, just a quiet, steady warmth, like justice hadn't only won, but grown roots. One evening, I walked along the beach. The waves brushed my feet and the sand sank under me. Far ahead, the sun was setting, painting the water in long streaks of gold. I stopped and looked at my reflection in that glowing sea. Not the dreamer I once was, not the woman scarred by betrayal. Just me, whole, calm, and free. I whispered, a message to my own past. They can take your credit, your work, even your name, but they can never take away your belief in your own worth. The sea wind rose, carrying salt to my lips. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. After everything, I had finally walked through the storm, and for the first time, I was standing in the light, not the spotlight of a stage, but the light that came from within. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky outside was still veiled in mist, the light soft as if filtered through silk. I made a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the ripples on the ocean. My heart felt strangely calm. It had been a long time since I dreamed about work, jolted awake at night by lines of code that refused to run, or heard Marcus's voice echoing in my head. Now there was only the wind, the waves, and the steady beat of my heart, like, for the first time, I was truly living for myself. 3 months had passed since I'd walked away from that war. Mirror, the small project I'd built in this seaside house, had spread across the world. No company behind it, no investors, no shares, just a community of people who believed technology could be transparent, fair, and kind. They wrote to me every day. A professor in Chicago said Mirror helped his students understand justice through code. A young engineer in India said it inspired him to teach his daughter that intelligence has no gender. A middle-aged woman wrote that my story gave her the courage to leave a job where she'd been silenced. I read every message and realized, sometimes, true victory isn't when the guilty are punished. It's when your pain becomes something useful. One afternoon, Lena stopped by. She still brought wine, as she always did. But this time, we didn't talk about headlines or fame. We just sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky red. She said, "You know, Elena, the article I wrote about you is now part of a journalism class. They call it the piece that changed how the industry views women in tech." I smiled. "Really? I only told the truth." "Yes," Lena said, "but you told it in a way that made people believe fairness still exists." Her words stopped me for a moment. I'd never thought of myself as proof of anything. I was just a woman who'd been mocked, underestimated, erased, and who chose silence no longer. When night fell and Lena left, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. A new email appeared on the screen. The subject line read, "Partnership Proposal." The sender, Dorian Chen, a name I never thought I'd see again. Dorian had been my rival years ago. We'd nearly tied in a programming competition once. Unlike Marcus, Dorian was genuinely brilliant, but just as ruthless as everyone else in this field. His email was short. "Elena, I've been following Mirror. It has the potential to become a global platform. If you're ready to scale, I'd like to invest. No contracts, no conditions, just a collaboration between people who tell the truth." I reread it, then laughed softly. That was the tech world for you. You think you've escaped it, and it knocks on your door again, this time with a gentler voice, but the same old promises: opportunity, power, influence. I typed one line in response: "Thank you, but this time, I'm not selling my dreams to anyone." Then I hit send, shut the laptop, and felt nothing but peace. The next day, I walked along the beach. The air smelled of salt, and the sunlight brushed the water in warm, golden streaks. I watched the waves roll one after another and thought about everything that had led me here. I had lost everything: my job, my reputation, my trust. But in losing it all, I found what mattered most: myself. And that, I realized, was the real beginning. That night, I began writing the first pages of the book Lena kept telling me to write. Not a memoir, not a victory speech, just reflections from someone who had lived between two worlds. One where intellect was measured by titles, and one where true worth existed only if you dared to name it yourself. On the first page, I wrote, "They used my code for 6 years. When I asked to be paid fairly, they laughed. But laughter doesn't erase the truth. It only echoes until someone stands up and says, 'Enough.'" I set the pen down and looked out the window. Darkness had fallen, but the sky wasn't completely black. There were still faint stars. Maybe justice was like that, I thought. It never disappears. It just waits for someone willing to look up. A year later, Mirror became an open source platform used in more than 50 universities. No one owned it. No one controlled it. It existed as proof of something simple: what's built with honesty outlasts any empire built on lies. That day, I was invited to speak at a conference on ethical technology. When I stepped on stage, the lights flashed across my face, stirring old memories. But this time, I didn't tremble. I didn't lower my head. I wasn't looking for recognition. I spoke slowly, my voice steady. "I'm not here to tell a revenge story. I'm here to say that sometimes the best way to win isn't by defeating someone, but by continuing to build in your own way." The hall went silent. Then one person clapped. Then two, then three, then hundreds. I looked out at the crowd, young faces, bright and eager, and I knew that even if they forgot my name someday, they would remember this. Respect isn't something others give you. It's something you create, line by line, step by step, decision by decision. That night, I returned to my seaside home. The ocean roared outside, but inside, I was still. I set my hands on the keyboard and began to type again, not out of duty, not for a contract, but for the pure joy of creating. On the screen, the words appeared: "New World Initiated, EB." I smiled and whispered to myself. They laughed when I asked for recognition. Now they'll have to see what I've built. Then I kept typing, slow, steady, each keystroke like a heartbeat, each line a reminder that I was still here, free, honest, and impossible to erase.